Good evening, everyone, and a further welcome from me. Thank you all. There's still people joining. It's a huge number, so thank you. It's incredibly heartwarming how big the response has been to this campaign, and that so many people care about lighter birds of prey in the Yorkshire Dales, especially. Just a recap for those who haven't followed, at Friends of Dales, we campaign on the issues of most importance to the Yorkshire Dales, and persecution of birds of prey came out by far as where people thought we should focus. And here we can uniquely make a difference by shining a light on the sad black spot that the Yorkshire Dales National Park is for the criminal killing of birds of prey. And in the background, we're continuing to change the direction of this charity, embracing new voices and different perspectives, especially the involvement of more younger people in all that we do, including how we run the charity. And I'm sure a lot of them are on the event tonight, which is great. So to the campaign, a reminder of our campaign of Eyes on the Skies, it's to raise awareness of the awe and majesty of birds of prey, how vital they are to a healthy ecosystem, but that they continue to be persecuted in the Yorkshire Dales area. But also to sort of see how you can help to spot and report crime, and also how we lobby politicians and decision makers on necessary reforms. Our partners in this are certainly more expertly placed on the specifics of the issue to which we will draw on, such as Mark especially, and the UK National Wildlife Crime Unit, the Yorkshire Dales National Park Authority, RSPB, and Harrier Action, amongst others. And we have some specific goals and a call to action that we're pressing for a number of changes. And they are, we want to see better national recording of wildlife crime, making these crimes notifiable, which would allow for the creation of a national database, enabling police forces, land managers, conservation bodies to work together, identifying trends, focusing resources, and coordinating action across the country. Secondly, we'd like to see penalties strengthened for offenders. The persistence of the persecution demonstrates that current sanctions do not always act as a credible deterrent. Meaningful fines and ensuring appropriate use of custodial sentences would send a clear message that illegal killing of birds of prey is being treated as a serious crime. And thirdly, we add our voice to that of others who are suggesting the need to regulate and license the game bird shooting industry, giving robust regulation and a system to ensure accountability and help prevent further offences. So the next stage of our campaign, we're looking to send an open letter to key politicians in government, and we'd love everyone to back this. So look out for that, it's coming soon, and that will amplify the call for reforms that I've just run to. So that's probably enough from me for now, because I need to get on with it and tonight's event. So I'll introduce and welcome Mark Harrison from the UK National Wildlife Crime Unit. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me to be part of the talk and to be part of the campaign. I'll just get my screen up. That should hopefully be there with everybody now. So good evening, everybody. My name is Mark Harrison. I'm a Detective Inspector with the National Wildlife Crime Unit. I'm actually a Greater Manchester police officer. I've been with Greater Manchester Police for 26 years now. And my career is predominantly focused on dealing with serious and organised crime, neighbourhood policing, and various issues that the police deal with. But for the last 3 years, I've been part of the National Wildlife Crime Unit. This talk, I'm hoping, will give you a bit of an insight in relation to what the unit is, how we're structured, the work that we do, particularly the work that we do around birds of prey. So let's get started. So who are we? We're a police support unit. The head of the unit is actually Chief Inspector Kevin Kelly. And then we've got a deputy head, which is a lovely lady by the name of Sue. Then there's myself, and we've got an information manager. There's 18 of us in total. We're a fully national unit covering England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And we've got intelligence officers, analysts, and quite a lot of backroom function, I suppose, for intelligence development and analytical work to be done. But my main responsibility is the 6 operational staff. I've got 4 investigation support officers and 2 detective constables. We're currently working on developing a financial crime unit within the National Wildlife Crime Unit, so that we can look at taking the money off the people who are committing crimes against wildlife. Our office is based in Stirling, in Scotland. We engage with a number of partners all over the UK. We work with every single police force across the UK, but we also work with a number of partners internationally as well, because a big part of our work is the illegal wildlife trade. So for that, we're looking at the function, working with people like Interpol, Europol, and organisations like that. Okay. So what do we actually offer? The functions that we do are all there on the screen, really. Sorry, are all there on the screen, really. It's a big part of our work is advice and guidance on legislation. We work with all the police forces. We're there to support them. We'll turn out operationally and assist them on searches, on warrants. A lot of police forces, most police forces actually don't have full-time full-time wildlife crime officers. They've got officers that do this work, this training on top of their normal day job. So there's a lot of inexperience out there in relation to this crime type. So we're there to be that support for them. We also offer specialist functions as well. So the type of things that I want to do with them is drone support, wildlife crime detection, dogs, and we'll assist with interviews, training. And like I say, the financial aspect is a big thing for us as we go forward. So what is wildlife crime? Well, for that, we also have to look at what is wildlife. It's any animal that is not domesticated or feral. So it doesn't include domestic animals such as dogs, cats, rabbits, budgies, those sort of things. It's wildlife crime legislation is very complex. There's an awful lot to take into consideration. It can be very confusing, and there are a number of other factors that we have to take into consideration, such as evidential standards, policies, and procedures, which are different across different police forces. There's threshold tests that we have to meet with the CPS. And on top of that, wildlife crime is not a priority across most of policing. It is obviously for us in our unit, but for most other police forces, they're looking at things like knife crime, violence against women and girls. So part of our work is to try and encourage and ensure that police forces can give a response to this crime type so that we can protect our wildlife. So our new strategy came out at the end of last year, and in our strategy, we do set priorities. The new wildlife crime priorities will be bats, birds of prey, badgers, illegal wildlife trade, illegal hunting, poaching, and hare coursing. So why do we set priorities? Well, crimes against wildlife are widespread, numerous, and varied. Police in the UK have a limited amount of resources to dedicate towards wildlife crime, so setting priorities allows law enforcement to direct resources towards specific goals and work more effectively. Threats, risks, and emerging issues are addressed at strategic, tactical, and operational level, and it's a big part of the work that we do is identifying current threats and emerging threats. So we have 2 ways of setting priorities. We've got conservation priorities, so where a species is vulnerable or endangered. Law enforcement action is required to prevent crimes which would have a negative impact on the species, and that's where a lot of the birds of prey sit within that priority area. But we also have non-conservation volume crime priorities, so they're typically higher number of incidents. So you're looking at hare coursing and things like that sit in that area. And often those species are not necessarily vulnerable or endangered. It's just the volume of the crime and the associated crime as well, because often with things like hare coursing, you'll get a lot of threats towards the landowner, the farmer, criminal damage to crops, to land, and to infrastructure as well. So what does bird of prey crime look like? This presentation is my opportunity to show you what it looks like from our perspective. I want to show you some of the challenges and obstacles that we face, not to be negative, but if we know where the obstacles are, it makes it easier to navigate them. There's also a lot of misinformation out there about this issue. It's very political and polarized, and I want to try and cut through all that noise and be honest with you about what we do. how we identify vulnerable locations and species that are at risk from crime, and some of the work that we do to protect it. I want to show you how we know a crime's occurred, where it occurred, and how this can be used to both investigate but also prevent further crimes from occurring. And I hope that it'll give people the confidence in our work, especially when it comes to satellite tagging data, which can be very complex and confusing. But I also want you to understand that this is difficult. We need your help to protect the birds in our skies. We're doing everything that we can to push for improvements. And I hope that by the end of this, you'll understand that the lack of results, the lack of convictions is not from a lack of will. In 99% of these cases, it's through a lack of evidence. We're not going to win this. We're not going to win this whole issue through arresting everyone. We're going to win it through changing practices, finding the middle ground and better coexistence with people. It's also an opportunity for you to see the challenges that we face, but how we're adapting and finding new ways of making a difference. For me, a key focus in all the policing I've ever done is prevention, preventing the crime before it happens. And we know that prosecution rates are low and that some people are twisting these figures to claim that it means that we're targeting the wrong suspects, or in fact that there is no crime. And even that we're playing with figures to paint a particular picture to make ourselves look good. And that's just nonsense. And I hope this presentation will help confirm to you that those statements are nonsense. I want you to see from the presentation that there is crime, and we know where it is, and we're doing everything that we can to tackle it. So first of all, I'll go through some of the barriers. Please don't let this get you down too much, because it's just some of the things that we have to go through. So some of the barriers facing wildlife crime in the UK. First of all, it's the remote locations and the impacts such as a lack of witnesses, no CCTV, passive data sources, exposure to the elements, and a loss of forensics through the weather, nature, natural predation. If you're policing in a town, all of those things are there to assist you, really. There's usually somebody who's seen something or heard something or CCTV around, and we don't get that in these rural locations. So time's a big issue. We don't have anyone phoning up saying this has just happened to me. So knowing when a crime's occurred has a big impact on our investigation runs. We have something called golden hour principles in policing, which is all about getting there as quick as we can to try and gather as much intelligence, information, and evidence as we can to put the victim and the offender in the location at the time that the crimes occurred. There's other issues, species identification. A lot of people don't know what wildlife we've got. They don't know that there are wildlife crimes. So some of the information that we get, if we get it, can be wrong, or it can be with good intent, but sometimes that can have an impact on how things play out. Like I said, the legislation is very complex, and it can be a tricky area to sort of work around. There's issues with police awareness, resources, training, and competing priorities. Forensics issues are always an issue, are always something that we have to really, really try and focus on. Not only gathering the evidence, but then there's costs for things like forensics expert witnesses, the use of detection dogs. Some of the bird of prey crime that we get is in relation to trade. We get some species, particularly peregrine falcons, that are traded, sometimes illegally, and the internet is used a lot for that. So there's issues around that. Brexit had a big impact in relation to information sharing, cooperative working, funding, exports, imports. CPS, the CPS, thankfully, we've got a new wildlife crime lead now within the CPS, and the Spocks are improving. But there was, like everybody else, they faced a number of cuts, so they were struggling for a while. But things are improving, but we've still got things that we need to do more of, training and access to make sure that we can achieve those evidential standards. Sentencing guidelines. I know a lot of people talk about that one. There's a lack of them, and it can be frustrating when you eventually get something to court and then you get a fine. That's pathetic, to be honest with you. Wildlife crimes are not recordable, which means they're not actually some of them are not recorded on P&C. Most of them, in fact, they're not notifiable. So we've got national crime recording standards for policing. So if someone phones up and tells us about a crime, we basically, if it's notifiable, we have to record it as a crime unless there's evidence otherwise. And that goes to the Home Office, so that the Home Office get crime figures so that you can see where these threats are and where they're emerging. That doesn't happen with wildlife crime. So again, it falls to our unit to try and collate that information from different sources so that we can try and show that reflection as best as we can. Politics. It's very polarized. There's lots of debates. There's even issues with people not coming to the police and just going for political impact straight away. There's so much misinformation out there, conspiracy theories about all sorts of things. And that does have a very serious impact on some of the work that we try to do. So just in relation to the police, wildlife crime training is not mandatory. I said that earlier. Officers do it off their own back. They just love wildlife, love being on the outdoors, and they want to try and make a difference. They're doing it in their own time and off their own back when they can fit it in. There's a lack of resources and equipment, everything from rural crime teams, wildlife crime officers, call centres. You ring a lot of call centres, particularly in the inner cities, they won't know what a lot of wildlife crime is. So we have to work with them, and there's been the unit before I came in has been doing a hell of a lot of work to try and bring that standard up so that everybody's aware of it. And I have to say that there's been significant improvements. There's still more to do, but we're always pushing against conflict and competing priorities, like the ones I mentioned earlier. Evidential burden is we have something called beyond reasonable doubt for criminal cases. So if there is any doubt, you're not really going to get that case home. And the CPS will look at that. They'll say, have we got sufficient evidence here to get a realistic chance of winning? And is it in the public's interest? They won't just go after somebody on a wing and a prayer just to try and get there. There's massive backlogs and workload, predominantly come about as a result of COVID. And we also have to factor in that a lot of summary offences, which wildlife crime is time barred. So usually there's a 6-month limit on it. So if it's usually from 6 months when we have sufficient evidence to say that an offence has taken place. But that is another thing that we have to factor into a lot of our investigations. We get a lot of challenges about press releases either not being done or taking too long to come out. So all press releases have to be done by the relevant police force. They can't be done by the National Wildlife Crime Unit or any of our partner agencies. And it has to follow the force's policy and procedure, taking into account the impact on investigations, any potential trial, other investigations that force are handling and trying to deal with, because it has an impact on resources. And they have to look at what are they going to get back? What sort of responses and inquiries are they expecting? What's the associated costs? What's it going to do to community tensions, associated intelligence, public order, public confidence? They have to factor in a wide range of things. We don't do press releases as police for all other crime types. We don't put a press release out for every burglary, for every shoplifting. So, but for some reason, there seems to be this expectation that there will be one for every single bird of prey crime. Now, I have my personal view on this, and I can see the advantages of having a timely press release and putting it out. But as a unit, we have to try and work with that force they're the ones who are aware of their bigger issues, and we have to accept that and work with them for that issues to be sorted out. The main issue for me that is if no press release is done, it leaves a void. And that void can then be filled by others, including people who've got extreme views and opinions. And that is actually holding things back by creating more conspiracy theories and distrust and a breakdown in relationships and communications. We also have freedom of information requests, social media and things like posts and blogs. And now all of those things, there is a benefit. I've learned a lot through social media before I started in this environment, but then I've also learned that a lot of the things that are on social media are wrong. So there's some benefit that can come from them, and it's a great tool, but you've got to take the time to stop and to let your emotions calm down. We have an equation, we call it I over E or E over I, which is intelligence over emotions. And sometimes your emotions are overriding your intelligence, and you just got to give yourself enough time to slow down, stop before you start posting things all over social media and winding everybody up. And just do some research, because there's a massive risk of misinformation and biased opinion. There's a lot of rage baiting that goes on out there. We get absolutely loads of freedom of information requests. We call them FOIs. And I know that other police forces and other organisations like Natural England get absolutely inundated with them as well, which is fair enough because people want to know what's going on. But that also takes up a hell of a lot of our time. If I get a request for every email that I've sent in relation to bird of prey crime, it can take me days just to pull that sort of information off. And while that's happening, I'm not doing my day job. I'm not doing what my core role is. So that has a big impact on us. Um, so, the delay, the lack of press releases can be interpreted in various ways, or the information that comes out from freedom of information can be interpreted in different ways. And I know we can all do better, and we are looking for how we can improve things that we can avoid. And we are pushing to try and make ourselves better at all the time, but we're not. I know we're never going to be able to please everybody. So this on the screen is just a summary of a short section of the Wildlife Crime Act, but each word in the legislation has been selected specifically. And it's crucial how it's applied, and this can have a big impact on how an investigation goes. It's often referred to as the points to prove in a case, and it's not just wildlife crime. This is everything: theft, murder, everything. There's the points to prove in every case. And the sort of things that you have to think about are what is a wild bird? Is an escaped cockatiel a wild bird, or a parakeet that was born in the wild in the UK? When is a nest in use or being built? Is it when the first twig is laid? Or is it when the nest, a vacant nest, but it's a fully made up nest in midwinter? What about taking something? When you're in possession of something, are you in possession of something in your house, a 20-minute drive away, or in your car 5 meters away, or when it's in your friend's house and you've asked them to mind it for you? When is a nest destroyed? Or all of these things are really important. And this is why it's so important for us when we're gathering all our evidence and intelligence to bring out these points to prove. Animal Welfare Act, another piece of legislation that we use quite a lot. Again, numerous points to prove with that one. And it's not just the points to prove that we have to consider. There are also a lot of defences that are written into the legislation. So we'll often get a defence statement from a solicitor or from a suspect in relation to what the angle that they're going to take with their defence. So that will be something that we have to take into consideration. But all of these things are just there in the background, bubbling away all the time. And in the UK, in criminal law, we have something called mens rea, or the mental state or the guilty mind of a defendant when committing a crime. It's a necessary element, and it has to be there with the physical act for there to be a conviction. So an act doesn't make a person guilty unless the mind is also guilty. So intention can change with different bits of legislation. It can include a clear intention to commit the crime, such as, well, I intend to go and steal that, or injure somebody, or something, or to kill something. And for most wildlife crime, that's what you need. It's that clear intention. Some offences have got recklessness, so that's a conscious disregard. So you need to be able the person has to see the risk involved for a particular action, but then think, I'm just going to do it anyway. But that's only on very, very few pieces of legislation with a wildlife crime. And then negligence, even less. It doesn't really come into it a wildlife crime at all. So I mentioned this one earlier, so I'll just briefly go for it again. If there's any doubt in the case, then it is highly unlikely to proceed. So under disclosure rules, all police must, and it is a must, highlight to the CPS and defence anything that was going to undermine the case or assist the defence. So if that's, there was another suspect, but we just focused on this one. You can't do that. We have to let them know. We have to let the CPS and the defence know. We can't hide it or dismiss it. It has to be disclosed for there to be a fair trial. And not just in wildlife crime, but there are a hell of a lot of very well publicised cases in the past where that's gone wrong. And a case can be stayed, which means just stopped at that point, whether anyone's guilty or not, or evidence can be excluded if it can be argued that it was obtained unfairly and that it's going to have an unfair impact on the case. Not to mention other issues then that will come out of that, such as an abusive process and any other legal challenge that we might get, and the damage that that can do to a police force, to a reputation, and to public confidence is horrific, really. So the threshold test also applies, and is there that realistic prospect of winning, and is it in the public interest? And it'll be the CPS that make that decision, usually in consultation with the police, but taking into consideration everything. And sometimes they will also talk to victims about that as well. It's not all bad news. But if we just keep using hammers to force people to do what we want, we're always going to be fighting the systems and people. We need the relevant people, the people on the ground in and around these offences, to take responsibility for implementing change and adapting their work practices, their private lives, etc., to be more wildlife friendly. That's the only way this is going to change long term. There are also other pieces of legislation that we are using, such as more conventional offences like theft and criminal damage, and that usually focuses around the satellite tags. Serious Crime Act, which came in looking at sort of gang leaders really, but the offences are encouraging or assisting someone to commit an offence, so we can find ways of introducing that into wildlife crime. And then we've got the Proceeds of Crime Act. So if anybody is making money from committing wildlife crime, we should be going after them. And now there's a massive drive within policing, within the CPS, to push this piece of legislation. The challenge for wildlife crime has been getting access to financial investigators because their priorities are drugs, guns, people trafficking. So what we've done internally within the National Wildlife Crime Unit is trained up some of our own staff. So it's very early days for us, but we have now got financial investigators and intelligence officers to bring through those prosecutions, and hopefully over the next few years we're going to start seeing a bigger impact and a bigger deterrent, because I don't think that the fines and sentences that we get in wildlife crime act as enough of a deterrent for these people. And the goal is to prevent crimes and to have better coexistence with people living with nature. But again, it has to be proportionate and it has to be achievable. So hopefully that's not depressed everyone. And I'm going to try and go through some of the jobs that we do now. But I think it is important for everyone to know the challenges that we face, because we need to be open and transparent with people. People need to know where we're coming from, and then they can see opportunities to support us and to help us, and to not get drawn into the polarized debate, and have a positive impact on this issue. So some of the work I'm going to talk about now, a couple of the operations that we've done over the last 12 months. So Operation Glassbeak was ran over the last 12 months, and it came about from conversations that my team and I were having with lots of people who monitor birds of prey, specifically peregrines. And peregrines are particularly vulnerable because they're targeted for a number of reasons, really. Usually some sort of conflict. So they're taking my pigeons, or they're stalking my pigeon loft, or they're taking our game birds. And they also get targeted by criminals who are involved in illegal wildlife trade. So peregrines can be taken at a very early age from a wild nest, rung by a criminal falconer to say, "Oh, I've bred this," and basically laundered into the falconry trade, and then sent all over the world, and then make money out of it. And the monitors were telling us that each year nests were failing. That just shouldn't be. Everything was right. There's enough prey there. There's no obvious signs of disturbance. Something just wasn't right. Something was just off. And they suspected that crime was the probable cause. And in a lot of those cases, they were just keeping that information to themselves. And it's only through some of the engagement work that we were doing where that was starting to emerge. So with limited resources, we wanted to make sure we were focusing on the worst affected locations, and working with partners. We reached out to raptor study groups across the UK and asked them to tell us about any similar nests. And we developed a risk matrix so that we could ID. It started off at the top 10, but then the police service from Northern Ireland joined in and they introduced 4. So we ended up with 14 nests that we were going to look at. And we attended each of those sites with local police. And if possible, we took forensic specialists, technical support units with us, and site assessments were done to ID the best possible techniques to both prevent crime, but also if we thought it was appropriate to capture evidence on anyone committing a crime. So at every site, something was done at every single one of those 14. Everything from obvious signs and barriers, various forensic traps, high visibility patrols. We visited landowners and spoke to them because they had the nests on their property. DNA sampling was done at every single nest, and deploying overt and covert technical equipment. The DNA samples were all added to the national database for wild peregrines. So that is done by SASA. Lucy Webster runs it up in Scotland, and we use that. We can use that database to compare DNA from captive bred birds to identify discrepancies in breeding records and potential offenders. And that has had some significant impact over the last 2 years, really. And the support we had from all of the partners was unbelievable. Unfortunately, no one was caught actually committing a crime, but we do think we missed one. We had surveillance in place well in advance of the birds settling down and nesting because we didn't want to disturb them. We got everything in place and turned the cameras off and just left it there, planning to turn it all back on just in time. However, unfortunately for us, some organised crime groups in the relevant area decided to start murdering each other. So all of the technical staff that we needed got redeployed to deal with those murders. And by the time they come back, the eggs had disappeared, and we think that they'd been taken. However, we did have successes. Multiple nests were successful for the first time, 9 years in one case, including one nest where we spoke with the landowner, and he was saying he hated the peregrines because they were flying off with his sheep every year. So after we explained to them that they don't, he left the peregrines alone, or he suggested that they would be fine, and chicks fledged for the first time in years. So we know that this tactic works. This year, it's going to be bigger and better. We're going to be doing a lot more nests and probably some different species as well. Operation Owl sits within the prevention part of our strategy for tackling bird of prey crime. This was originally set up by North Yorkshire Police. Brilliant idea. So we spoke to them, we've now adopted it, and we're taking it national. So I hope everyone knows about Operation Owl, but if you don't, very quickly, just some of the things that we've done in the last 12 months. We've done lots of talks and presentations to Female Falconers Club, Global Bird Fair, Partners Against Wildlife Crime Conference, Scottish Raptor Study Conference, lots and lots and lots of different places. Total audience, well over 1,000 people. We take the time ourselves, my staff, even though it's not something that they're trained to do. We write a lot of articles for magazines, and we've had them published in everything. We're trying to reach out to everybody who goes outside to be our eyes and ears, to report intelligence and let us know what's going on out there. So we've had articles in things like Fell Runner, Countryside Jobs, The Great Outdoors, Yorkshire Dales Review, Scramble, Farmland Scotland. Posters and leaflets have been put up all over the place. Well over 1,000 leaflets have been shared with everybody. We've created a YouTube channel, which is going to be a big project for us this year. We're hoping to be able to talk about cases, to talk about issues and problems, and sort of reach out to people a little bit more. We've enlisted a lot of outdoor instructors across Scotland, and they're going to be Operation Owl ambassadors. We've done podcasts with Jack Perks, who's got the Bearded Tip podcast. That's going to be broadcast in spring of this year. We've got Indy Green and Yola Williams, who are public allies for us, supporting us, posting videos and raising awareness. And then anyone who remembers the Really Wild show, Nick Baker from that, as a naturalist and TV presenter, he's looking forward to working with us, and we're open to do some work this year with him as well. So, Harrier Task Force, this is probably one of my main areas of work. And when I joined the National Wildlife Crime Unit, I was tasked with looking at raptor persecution, or bird of prey crime as it's now called. Initially, I took a bit of time to review what the general issues were, and then I tried to assess what could be done. I've got several areas that I want to work in, but I saw an opportunity with satellite tagged birds and hen harriers in particular. So looking at the data from satellite tagged hen harriers through an enforcement lens, and we can cross-reference that with police data, land registry data, and other information, and it was clear that there was a couple of things that we could do. So what we've done is we've mapped suspected crimes involving hen harriers using police data, and it is police data, it's not given to us by anybody else, identifying hotspots with the greatest threat, harm and risk. We're taking positive, proactive steps to address those risks, prevent crime and protect the birds, increase the consequences for committing crimes involving hen harriers, found a way of quickly finding out that a suspected crime had occurred, improve the police response to make sure that the police take primacy, the police lead on investigation and get there first, increase our chances of gathering best evidence, ensure the best evidence is available to the court if required, and working with stakeholders to find, agree on and implement long-term solutions so that they and we can all coexist with hen harriers. At the time, I was inspired by a detective chief superintendent. It was a really nice man that was a Merseyside police officer called Mark Baker. And he was, I'd done a little bit of work with him, but he was the senior investigating officer on the murder of a 9-year-old girl. And they did an amazing piece of work, Merseyside Police, in relation to the community side. And they used a model called Clear, Hold, Build. And this model is essentially a 3-step plan which sees the criminals cleared from an area through relentless pursuit activity, making it as difficult as we possibly can for them. And that involves the community as well, not just the police. The area is then held and stabilized through high visibility, assistance from partners, and then the support from the stakeholders and the community. We try to build in long-term solutions that are crime-free, and the community then polices itself. And I believe that that model could be followed for the Harrier Task Force. Stop the crime, then hold it whilst we build together for the future. And wildlife crime is unique, and bird of prey crime in particular. It's hard to gather evidence and to reach successful prosecution. So the best way to stop the crime is to focus on the greatest threats and be proactive there. Stop the crime before it happens, as opposed to chasing it afterwards. So we established the Harrier Task Force and developed some new tactics because the way we were dealing with it just wasn't working. We created new practices, standard operating procedures, standardized reporting methods to ensure there's consistent reporting and response. We established a mutual aid agreement with the relevant police forces across the north of England so that there was always a police officer available to go. So if I phoned up Cumbria Police and said, right, we need to do research on Monday, and they said, well, we haven't got the resources, we're tied up with something else, I could then go to the neighbouring force and say to them, can you offer somebody? And it's so far, we've always had somebody available to turn out and to attend an incident. So to help the local police, my team is now on call 7 days a week. It's my turn this week. I'm on call for the Harrier Task Force this week to do the initial analysis of the tag data and relevant intelligence for any missing hen harriers. This means that if one of the tagging agencies, which is usually the RSPB or Natural England, thinks that they've got a bird that's gone missing, they can send a referral form to us, a standard referral form with a minimal standard of report. It comes to us and we can very quickly analyse it, look at all the police data in the background and identify if there's any suspicious circumstances around it and launch an appropriate response. We're very, very critical when we analyse this data. We know that we've got to maintain our credibility because I can't have it falling into that grey area where people can then start spinning conspiracy theories and throwing in the misinformation and clouding the issue. So I want to make sure that every incident is categorised and graded appropriately. Unfortunately, a lot of young hen harriers do die of natural causes in the first year, and we take that into consideration. We take all of the risk factors into consideration so that we've got real confidence in our assessment. We know that assessment is potentially going to be evidence when it goes to court. We've developed new techniques for analysing the tag data, mapping hotspots. A hotspot is basically a repeat location for suspected crimes involving hen harriers in a 3-year period. Then we identify who owns that land, and if there's no current live investigations, we wait for them to finish. My team and I and the local police will go and visit them. We'll go and sit down with that landowner at that top level and tell them what's occurring on their land, what the risks are, and we present the information and the data to them. And we share our work and hypothesis. So our hypothesis are it's either someone who's got legal access to the land who's committing these crimes, i.e. an employee, or it's a trespasser coming onto their land, probably with a firearm, because that's how most NRAs are killed, committing crimes. Now, the second one poses the greatest risk to the landowner, their staff, and the public. So presenting the data to them in that way highlights this significant risk, and they cannot just ignore me and walk away. Most of the people we go and visit will say it's not us. But that for me then says, right, okay, you've got to work with us then because you've got legislation such as health and safety now. So we've identified the risk to your staff. You have to work with us now to prevent these incidents from occurring. We asked them to work with us to find out what's going on and to end the criminal activity, to protect people, wildlife, and businesses involved. We asked for permission to do things like high visibility patrols, install cameras, to use other to use other crime prevention techniques, things that are quite common for other hotspot areas. And it also helped them with the other crimes that they're experiencing because they do get things like fly tipping and hair coursing taking place. And we maintain contact with them for a 2-year period whilst they're still categorised as a hotspot, providing them with updates, support, and then taking action if we need to. We changed the focus from purely wildlife crime to include crimes like theft and criminal damage to the tags, and potentially other offences like fraud, encouraging or assisting. This increases the consequences for a criminal, and it could also provide the police with access to different policing tactics, particularly more covert tactics. And a lot of these other offences are recordable and notifiable, which is something that wildlife crimes aren't. So notifiable crimes push up crime figures. So all of a sudden you'll have the crime commissioner for the area, or uh, it's particularly with the reforms that are going on now in relation to performance figures, you'll have a lot of bosses turning around saying, why am I all of a sudden getting thefts and criminal damages taking place in these rural locations? What's going on? So it'll help trigger resources and focus in different areas. It has wider social, economic, and political impact. I say we're using Operation Owl, but we've also got new drones. So the drones that we've got have got satellite tracking kit fitted to them, which removes any of the issues with the terrain because it's all bumpy and undulating. And we can even use these drones now to find a tag that's buried or hidden and concealed underneath any foliage. And the wildlife crime detection dogs that we've got are just unbelievable. They are absolutely unbelievable, and they've won loads of awards recently. I think research has been done to the success of a dog finding things over a human, and I think it was something like 11% for a human chances of finding something compared to 98%, I think it was for a dog. They are unbelievable. Don't use the eyes to find things. It's all about the nose. And we're working with partners and using the IUCN Wildlife Conflict and Coexistence Guidelines as a tool for building for the future. We need to find long-term solutions. We can't just keep doing whack-a-mole, running around chasing people who are doing offences. So that chart just again summarises what we've done, what we're doing. The crime is killing protected species. It's using vast amounts of resources and funds, and it's undermining public confidence, both in the police, but it's also fueling the conflict between conservation groups and the whole shooting community, not just driven grouse shooting. And it's a huge shame because the crime is undermining some amazing work that is actually going on between these two groups. If you just do a little bit of research, you'll find a lot of shooting estates that are doing. Rottall Estate in Scotland is amazing. I believe I've not been myself yet, but I believe Bolton Abbey Estate, it does absolutely amazing work for wildlife. I've been to Castle Bolton Estate, again, really, really good. There's loads of really good work out there that's going on, and you don't want to get drawn into the online debates about this sort of stuff. But these criminals are undermining all of that good work. But what's not happening is the people within some of these groups are not reporting, they're not providing that information to the police and assisting us with what's going on, and that's got to change as well. So hen harrier crimes at an all-time high in 2023, and I'll show you how that got to that point shortly. Yeah, there was a lot more birds up on the hill, but that doesn't mean we should accept more crimes. So, but unfortunately, there's never been a prosecution in England and Wales for a hen harrier crime, mainly due to the barriers that I've highlighted earlier. And how the tags help us in a number of different ways. So they're designed to assist with monitoring species for conservation purposes. They're solar powered, and you can often last for years. Data is collected over long periods of time. And because of that, it shows us habitual movement. Basically, lifestyle's a subject. If I was watching a drug dealer, I'd be watching them for quite a long time. I would want to establish lifestyle to see whether they were operating criminally. And these tags give us that sort of insight into the life of a hen harrier, what it's doing, where it's living, where it's eating, where it's sleeping. All of that information can be gleaned from the satellite tag data. We've got location data, and that can be traced onto ordnance survey and satellite maps. We can overlay that with satellite images, land ownership information that we get from the land registry, and that's a reliable independent source. I'm a bit concerned about relying on open source type of information because I want to make sure it's as accurate as possible. The tags also send details about orientation, temperature, and that's an ambient temperature. So if that's next to a live bird, it will have a certain temperature and it'll be fairly constant. and we can compare that to the weather and any other impact factors that are surrounding the bird. Battery life and charge, we can see that all the time. And what these things do is they give you an indicator. If you've got a dodgy tag that keeps going off or it's got a fault, you'll start to see that before it actually goes down. And all of those things help you when you're making your assessment. Sorry, just let me see what I'm up to. So we collate intelligence, police force data relation to bird of prey crimes and things that have been going on in the past, and we overlay that with the satellite tag data. We look at everything from intelligence, previous incidents, but also what are the risks to the birds in this area if a bird's gone missing? Is there a wind farm there? Are the power lines there? What's the natural predation in that area like? What was the weather like at that particular time? All of these things come into us when we're making an assessment. And how we map them is we'll start with a base map of the UK, put on the force boundaries, land registry data, and then we literally plot off location data. Now, the location, you've got to be careful with the last known fixes when you're looking at it. People tell me, oh, I've been on the Natural England website and I've had a look at their last known fixes, and some of them are over here and some of them are over there, and you've got to be really, really careful because there's an error ellipse within a last known fix. So some of them, they're graded, they're all graded differently, and I won't get into how that all works because it's very complicated. But ultimately, you get a very good standard one where you can look and say, oh, it's within 250 square meters, and then you get really bad ones where it's within 26 kilometers or more. So we'll only focus on the best ones, on those really, really focused down ones, which help us say where something's occurred. Otherwise, we can't search for an area and we can't start making accusations in relation to where things are. But then when you get people like Natural England who are recording this information, they can't go into the realms of fantasy. They haven't got the time, the staff, the resources, or the space on their data sheet to do that. So they'll just record the centre fix. So you've got to be really, really careful when you're interpreting what's out there. And that's not Natural England's fault. It's just the way it is. It's the way of the world. But like I said, we'll only focus on those that are the best fixes, and we take the raw data. We won't say to the RSPB, can you send us over what's going on? We'll ask for the raw, uncut data, and we will transfer it, and we will then analyze it ourselves independently. And we map where the biggest threats are. And unfortunately for hen harriers, I mean, I suppose it's where the habitat is, but we'll map on where they are so that we can focus our resources in these particular areas. So the police need to justify their actions and the decisions. So if we're going to do a search somewhere, we've got powers to do that, but we have to be able to say that we've got reasonable cause to suspect an offence has taken place, and that we suspect that we'll find evidence of it when we're going on doing a search. So all my staff are trained to do this sort of thing, and we'll have a look at national crime recording standards, both in England, Wales, and Scotland. We utilise them. We're trained to assess satellite tag data. We're constantly reviewing it ourselves, and we're looking at as many different things as we can. In policing, we have something called the National Decision Making Model, which you can Google if you need help going to sleep. But it is actually a really, really useful tool for the police, and it helps us with decision making. It's just a circular model, basically: information intelligence, assess the threat, harm, and risk, develop a strategy, consider your powers and policy, ID your options, take action, review it, and keep going round. And throughout that, your code of ethics runs throughout. So we apply that to all the decisions that we make. And we'll analyze it, and then we'll color code, we'll grade each incident. And you can see that on the table here. And all of the data then that we use for hotspot mapping is just the black and the red. The confirmed, which is evidence confirms that an offence has been committed. So we've got a bird back and it's got gunshot in it, or suspected crime, where there's a reasonable cause to suspect an offence has been committed. Natural causes cannot be ruled out, but it's not likely. They're the two that we focus on. So since we started the Harrier Task Force, we actually started it the end of 2023, but started the practical work in 2024. But we went back, we needed a time period to go back. So we went back to 2021. Now in 2021, all of our staff weren't in place, and the data wasn't really there. So I'll pull a graph up shortly, which will show the why I think that 2021 was skewed. But since 2021, we've analysed 139 incidents relating to most of them. I think probably 135 or so of them relate to satellite tagged hen harriers. And just about half-ish are graded as confirmed crimes or suspected crimes. Unfortunately, quite a few of them are unknown. We don't know what's going on. And I won't guess. I won't just say, oh, because it's gone missing in this particular area, it must be a crime. There has to be a little bit more than that. There's been no prosecutions to date. And each of these satellite tags cost around about £2,500. There is additional cost on top of that with downloading the data. I think that can be about £600 annually. So these are expensive bits of kit. And currently there's over £100,000 worth of equipment missing. And it's worth noting that these tags are designed to be used in conservation across the world. The UK is unique in the number of tags that we've had suddenly disappear and go missing. That you don't get these sort of figures anywhere else in the world. Just seems to be a UK issue. And they're designed to be found. They transmit what I call it a death signal, but it's got a more scientific name. But basically, the tag recognizes when its host is dead, usually through, I don't know, inactivity or temperature. And it'll then set out a lower frequency signal so that when you go up into that area, you can find it. It makes it easier to find it, and they just don't get found, which suggests that they're being disposed of. So how that 55 breaks down is actually 13 confirmed and 42 suspected to be criminal. So that's a graph that shows the increase in suspected incidents, confirmed crimes in the past 5 years. Like I said, people weren't in post in 2021. 2023 was really bad. We had that figure there is just the suspected and confirmed crimes. We had an unbelievable number of reports that come into us that year. We still get a lot of reports that come into us. There seems to be peaks and troughs. The breeding season is a significant period, and also the autumn going into winter, where birds are fledging, and then the weather starts to have an impact on them as well. But just because there's more birds up on the hill doesn't mean that we should sit back and say, oh, well, we can just accept a few extra crimes. Then, if this was burglaries or robberies, and we were showing an increase in crimes with no prosecutions, there'd be a lot of people being asked serious questions, and people would be expecting the police and partners to be doing something about it. But it's not just about preventing crime. So we've got detection dogs, drones, specialist tracking devices, metal detectors. We've got everything ready to go. We've got people on standby, people on call. We've got mutual aid agreements in place. We've got everything there to give us our best chance to recover evidence. But when we go out and we've got all that stuff, I've been accused. Someone said to me, "Oh, it was. I think it was just a show of strength." Yeah, it is. It is a show of strength. It's a show of our strength and the commitment of what we're prepared to do, the lengths that we're prepared to go to try and recover evidence, to act as a deterrent. When we're out there and people see you turning out like that, they stop and talk to you. And the number of members of the public that they're giving us support, it's amazing, really. And it is a boost to public confidence and to police confidence. But we also want people to see that we take it seriously so that they will report incidents to us. It's not just about reacting, establishing the response, is clearly a part of our strategy. But we now need to try and move from hold, which is where I feel we are at the moment, into sort of build. So once a hotspot is identified, we contact the landowner, we arrange that visit, and we go and see them. We have to wait for all lines of inquiry to be visited, to be exhausted. Now, that doesn't mean that crime is closed. If there's no prosecution, the crime's still open. But we'll go and we'll speak to those people in that hotspot, and we'll give them the details of the crime so they don't. Because I regularly see it where someone will come in for interview, they'll go back, and when they're speaking to the bosses, they'll give them their version of events, or when they speak to other people in other organisations, they'll give them their version of events. So I want to go and give them the facts. Now we can't say that the person that we've interviewed is definitely the person who's committed the crime, because if we thought that, we'd be charging them. But what we can say is, a crime has definitely occurred in this location. And when you go and speak to some of these people, I know that if I go on their land within an hour, someone will be coming and speaking to me saying, sorry, do you mind telling me what you're doing because you're on private land? So if it's not them that's committing it, they must see people in and around. They must be able to provide us with intelligence to help us. But at the moment, it's not happening. So we part of this engagement and talking to people is to say, look, you need to feed it from the top, being the owner, the boss, or whatever that you might be, to try and get this to change, because it's not just undermining your business, shooting, conservation. It's undermining a lot of good community work that can go on, and how we can all work together. So we need to make sure that the crime is stopping. Now, hen harrier crime is continuing. It is continuing. We see that in the wider data. The worst offending repeat locations is the hotspots, and we identified 8 in total. But there was 6 initial ones that we identified in 2024, and we went seeing them, and then a further 2 were identified, because don't forget we go back for 3 years. So when other crimes have occurred, we have to wait for those crimes to finish, and then we can go and speak to them. So I've done the last 2 visits to the hotspots as well now. And we give them that hypothesis, and we ask them to work with us to try and sort things out to make things stop for the future. And since we've been doing them visits to the hotspots and engaging with people, there's not been a single, not one incident involving a hen harrier on one of those hotspots. And you've got to remember that they are the worst repeat offender locations, where crimes have been going on and on and on and on and on. And we've just picked up on it at a particular point. And since we've been doing those visits and working with those people, and that was January 2024, so we're 2 years in now, there's not been a single incident. I can say not been a single incident involving a tagged hen harrier, because the birds that aren't tagged, we don't know. Unless someone finds them or reports it to us, we don't know if a crime's occurred or not. The satellite tag birds are an indicator. They give us a heads up that a crime's taking place, and not one has occurred in an area of a hotspot. Still a long way to go, but I think that's a huge improvement so far. So a couple of stories, some of the case studies, the jobs that we worked through, and it is mind-blowing the level of detail that we can glean from a satellite tag. In some cases, imagine a satellite tag being a sat nav that you have in your car, updating locations every few minutes, detailed information covering activity, temperature, exact orientation of the tag. That's the sort of thing that we see. And I can tell you that we're able to see exactly where and when an individual has been the victim of a crime, when a tag's been removed from a bird, and even in some cases when it's travelled upside down in a vehicle across ground before being disposed of. The eagle ones are even better. We can tell when they're in someone's pocket because of the angle that it's at and where it's moving and the speed that it's going at. You don't get quite as much of that detail with the hen harrier tags because they're smaller, but we still get a lot. So some of you might have heard this before, or you're in it for the first times, but these crimes I'm going to talk about now show intent, show that they're taking place. It's organised and it's deliberate, and a lot of it there's attempts to mislead the police, to destroy evidence, and to do everything possible to avoid detection and being linked to a crime. So the use of a magnet. So these are live cases, which means that there's no current lines of inquiry, but they haven't been closed. So that's why, unfortunately, it's pixelated out a little bit like that, because I can't expose where this crime's taking place. So there's 2 stories here represented by the orange and the pink markings on the map, but both revolve around the same theme. And at some point, both have been reset with a magnet. So there's a way with these satellite tags that you can turn them on and off with a magnet. Why you'd want to know that? Why you'd even got your hands on a satellite tag? You wouldn't. You'd have had to have done something to a bird or found a dead one to find them. Why would you turn a magnet on it? Why on and off? It just doesn't make sense. So they reset with the magnet, both of them, and moved 15 or 16 kilometers away, and then the magnet was tweaked again to allow another transmission. Before then, the tags just disappeared. So the idea with that is you take the tag, turn it off, take it somewhere else, let it ping, so then it looks like the last known fix is 15 to 16 kilometers away. What you're not factoring in is we can see that. We can see that. And we work closely with the manufacturers of the tags to confirm our interpretations of the data when presented like this. And it's categoric that that's the only way that the data can look like that. And we've recreated it as well to prove that that can work. So the first one, the orange ones, represented by the orange markers. So we can say around midday on a spring morning in 2023, the tag had completed its transmission cycle on an upland moorland, and then when it transmitted later that evening, just before 9 o'clock in the evening, it had been reset and it was now 16 kilometers away. So some of the warning flags to say that some for us that things weren't right was the tag came on out of cycle. So they have set periods you can predict when they're gonna, and that helps us find them. So we'll know, oh, it's supposed to transmit between 5 and 9 o'clock, this tag. So we'll be in the area and we're close to it when it's transmitting. It helps us find it. So this one came on out of sync, so something had gone wrong. The battery voltage was high enough for several days continued transmission with regardless of whether it got been charged up by the sun. Assessments, we looked at the lifespan of the tags, was done to assess if there was any sign of tag failure, and there was nothing. They were working perfectly fine. But despite attempts, we couldn't find or recover the tag. And like I said earlier, that's unusual in itself because they're designed to be found. So we can't say for certain where an incident's occurred, but we can say for certain that something happened to the tag and the bird. The tag was reset and then moved, which gives us a super strong suspicion that a crime has occurred. So the most likely scenario, human interference, was causing the bird to die. Tag removed after a magnet has been applied to it to prevent the transmission. Magnet then removed at night to allow a brief transmission of data to try and redirect the location of suspected criminal activity. And this is one reason why you can't rely purely on that last known fixed data. You've got to go into it. You've got to go deeper and analyze it further than that. And they're the sort of discrepancies in location of crime and recovery that are picked up on by some people and some organisations when they say, "Oh, you're just trying to target us. You're just trying to target us." The last known fix was 70 kilometres up the M6. We can present this data when we need to. So this is the other bird, and you've seen it. It's not too far from the previous tag, and this has happened on a weekday afternoon in autumn 2023. And this one tells us a little bit more. Same story as the previous tag. But here, the data strongly suggested that there was a catastrophic incident at the location prior to the magnet being applied and being turned off or reset. And the data suggests that the bird died in the immediate vicinity of the fix. And because the incident happened during the transmission window, so nobody knows when these transmission windows are set to be, apart from the people who fit the tags. And someone has done something to this bird during that transmission window, which gives us a real insight, and we've got a 30-minute window when we know this bird's died. The tag was most likely removed at that point, and we can see that the tag was moving whilst the bird was dead. So I often get challenged with that one by some people saying, "Well, the tag was recovered 70 kilometers away." Yeah, no, but the bird was dead, so it must have been in a vehicle or in the pocket of a person. And then the magnet was applied, and the tag moved before the retransmission, again to redirect enforcement authorities. And you can see how close these data points are to residential buildings and other outbuildings. But this highlights what we're dealing with and trying to investigate. This incident occurred a number of kilometres from the nearest road on private land. The site is tough upland moor with difficult access. The data is the witness, but it can only tell us so much. It can't tell us who was responsible. So an expert witness report and cooperative statements from the manufacturer and other experts all came in. We got a warrant. We granted with the warrants, we went up and did some searches. And we tried to locate the carcass or other additional evidence. We used tracking kit, carcass detection dogs, metal detectors. The suspect was interviewed, but no charges could be brought because we couldn't say beyond reasonable doubt who it was. So this is a story about two birds who started their stories with us the same week in December in 2022. Both tags were associated with associated data, were reported to National Wildlife Crime Unit, and both were categorised as suspected criminal. The tags have been functioning well and then suddenly stopped. We call it stop no malfunction. They've both been regularly transmitting despite low battery readings, but we're only finding out why that was occurring months later. The position of the birds had ended up in such a way that prevented them from charging the solar panels. We had the last known fixes, but the error radius was too big. So we knew that there hadn't been a terminal failure with the tag, or the bird, anything had happened to it during the transmission window. But the suspicion was that something had happened outside of a transmission window, and without further information, we had no place to do a search. And that's what I was saying to you before about that error radius. If it's too big, we can't go in. We haven't got powers to go in on a wing and a prayer on a fishing trip and just open see what we can get. We have to suspect that with reasonable cause that we're going to find some evidence in that location. So yellow and blue markers on this one represent the two tags. The yellow one, so this tag went offline in December 22, but in April 23, it suddenly pinged back to life. So the bird was located by research staff. So sometimes what will happen is they will go out and do a recovery on a tag, but they will be told if there's any suspicion of crime when you get there, you need to back off. So in this case, they went up. They were actually accompanied by a member of the estate staff so that they could get access, and they immediately contacted us to get some advice. So considering the assessment of the bird, it was decided that the police need to go up there and they need to do a seizure. So they took primacy. They went up and recovered the birds, and they were sent this bird, and it was sent off for a post-mortem. The post-mortem included an X-ray, which revealed the bird had been shot at some point, and it was carrying a piece of lead in its carpal joint, which would have made flight difficult but not impossible. But due to the state of the remains, the post-mortem was inconclusive about cause of death and whether the piece of shot was associated with the time of death. But the story doesn't stop there. The second tag went offline in December 22 as well, but amazingly in June in 2023, that one also pinged back to life. So the research team immediately contacted my unit to seek advice, and it was believed that it was on the same land holding as the other bird. So we thought, right, we need to send the police up there. We need to forensically seize the bird and get all the examinations done as best as we can. And from the data, the Royal Police, Natural England Enforcement ourselves, we had some low quality location fixes that gave us a rough area that we could search. We also knew that there was a transmission window due about 8:15 on a Thursday evening that week. So with that data, we knew we had a decent chance of getting up there with the kit that we've got and trying to track it down. So together with Natural England's enforcement team, we attended the area. Again, several kilometres. We had to walk in several kilometres from the nearest road with all this kit and drones and everything. Working in two teams, we managed to locate the tag still attached to the remains of the bird. And you could see from the position of it that it looked like it had glided into its resting place in a peat hag, and that the surrounding ground had been preventing the sunlight from hitting the tag. And it was only because it was near to the longest day of the year that it had been able to get some sun, and it suddenly pinged back up. So these things, if they're there, they will eventually manage to send usually they'll manage to send out some sort of signal, and we can get up there and recover it. So the post-mortem included an X-ray which revealed that the bird had also been shot at some point, and it was also carrying some lead shot in its carpal joint. Pretty much exactly the same. Again, no, the PM was inconclusive about cause of death and whether the piece of shot was associated with the time of death. So we've got two shot birds on the same landholding. Search warrants were carried out on two individuals, but despite our best efforts, we could not prove any links to the shooting of these two birds. We just couldn't prove who and where it happened. So sometimes it isn't just the data that gives something away, it can be the actual tag. So natural mortality in the first year of hen harriers can be quite high, even immediately post-fledging. But the carcass and the tag are recoverable and can go into the system for post-mortem and further examinations. And a lot of that is for conservation purposes. They want to know what's going on. They want to make sure that the satellite tags aren't having an impact on the birds, but it also helps us with our investigations. And in this case, routine post-fledging monitoring identified that there was a ground track mortality signal. That's a death signal, I call it, from earlier, coming from one of these birds. A quick search and the tag was located and identified. And the bird's carcass was still attached to the bird, and the carcass showing signs of predation. A quick visual check of the tag showed what appeared to be damage to the casing that was highly unusual. And given that there was a small hole in the crack, it was considered that it could have been from some sort of high velocity impact, but it could also have possibly been caused by a tooth or a talon from a predator. So, given that all the bodies of criminally killed hen harriers recently recovered, with the exception of one, have been shot, it was thought the most likely scenario here was could this be some sort of damage from a shot? But we can't just guess. We needed to get some evidence from that. So the bird was examined by ZSL, as most tagged hen harriers are. An X-ray showed no sign of shots in the carcass, but there was a number of broken bones. And this in itself wasn't surprising because the carcass did show it had been scavenged when it was located and seized. So the tag was then sent to Nottingham Trent University, who examined the tag and found lead residue on the outside. But they were unable to say whether this was from inside the tag leaking out or whether it was some sort of contact from the environment. And there was no foreign objects inside the tag. So from there, we sent the tag to a ballistics expert in Scotland who did even more work on the tag. And the analysis by a ballistics expert showed that the direction of impact on the tag, and they did the test as well for lead and found that it was positive, and they could show the direction of impact. And this was compared to a control of lead gunshot, and they produced comparable results. In the expert's assessment, that's based on the size and shape, it's consistent with having been caused by a spherical shaped projectile no more than 3 millimeters in diameter. It hadn't penetrated the casing, but it struck it and ricocheted off. So it's difficult to show on a 2D picture, but the damage appears to be in an upwards trajectory, left to right, when you're looking at it, and hopefully you can make out the blue line on the picture. Assuming that the bird was flying flat and level, not diving or climbing, the source of the projectile is consistent from originating beneath it, shooting up. So, given the nature of the damage and the positive lead test, the expert would be happy to say that this was consistent with having been caused by a shotgun discharge utilizing bird shot size shot, and it was likely within a 30-meter range. So it took a significant amount of time and management to get that to that point. And it was only thanks to ZSL, Nottingham Trent, Police Scotland's ballistic expert that we could even say that a crime had occurred. But what we couldn't say is where it occurred and who did it. So you think about the amount of time and money that that took to get to that point, and we still couldn't take an investigation any further. But it goes to show these are the lengths that we're going to evidence a crime has taken place, and it won't necessarily be because we're after a conviction, but we can use that information to proactively go to agents, to go to people who are disputing the fact that these crimes are taking place, to say, here's the evidence. It's quite clear that these crimes are still occurring. And we can't just hide behind the fact that, oh, prosecutions are low and we don't know who's doing it. We've got to work together to make this change, because for the good of everybody, for those people who are arguing against these issues and sort of saying that we're trying to focus on all people in shooting, that's nonsense. I've got no issues with shooting at all. What I have got an issue with is crime. I'm a police officer and I will investigate it to the nth degree. And that's what we're trying to do with these offences. So this is the last one, I promise. This incident occurred in October 2024, and we work closely with Northumbria Police to investigate this one. So we received a load of data, and importantly for this satellite tag, it had GPS capabilities built in as well, so it was even better. So in this picture, this is a snapshot of the data. So it comes as a mishmash of figures, and we have to go through a process to get it to some sort of pictorial thing like this. And this is just a snapshot. And if you look closely, you can probably see some of the circular ellipses, and you can see sort of how big some of them sort of get. And we would dismiss all them and just focusing on the best ones. So mid-October 24, we get a report of the tag with concerns, and with landowner permission, we research the area, and we get up there, and it takes 3 days, but we managed to locate the tag. And when we find it, and don't forget, this is with landowner permission, they've said, yeah, come on, we'll help you if you want us to. But obviously, we don't want to contaminate any crime scenes with any potential people who could be suspects. So if people are prepared to provide us with access, that sort of shows a little bit of an indication about whether they might be involved in the crime or not. but they were more than happy to assist and to support us. And we got up there, took 3 days, but found it. And what we found is the tag had been cut off. You could see that there's no way that that had been done by any predator or anything else. This has been cut off by a person. So straight away, criminal damage. So we've got an offence there straight away. Northumberland Police were brilliant. Straight away put a crime in for criminal damage. So this has been cut off, removed from the bird, and then the tag has been dumped. So one can only conclude that this was done to redirect an investigation, to remove the last known fix from where the bird was most likely killed, and then the tag was removed. But thankfully, we had a huge amount of data to work with, and then we worked collaboratively with other experts and we're highly confident in our hypothesis for this. We analysed the whole life data of this tag prior to enforcement action to rule out any potential issues with the tag and its components, and it was fully functioning, working without fault or error. I've recently been asked about the error in relation to satellite tags, and it was a challenge that came back to me from one of the visits I did, and it was they'd spoken to the CEO or the company that manufactured the tags, and yeah, the tags can fail, and they estimated it was about a 7% failure rate, which is fair enough. But out of the ones that we assess, we've got over 50% that are criminal, suspected to be criminal. There's a massive discrepancy there, plus the number of tags that we never get to recover. Anyway, getting back to this one. So we know exactly where it was when the incident occurred. And when I say incident, we mean that the bird was alive and well when it went into roost on a particular evening in October. The roost was a remote upland site with no easy public access. The bird was killed and the tag was removed by 8 o'clock the following morning. And from the temperature and activity readings, this was sometime between 4 in the morning and 8 in the morning. And there's two events, death and tag removal, and they occurred at or around the same time. And it's only through in-depth analysis that we can start to determine this. And this takes time to work through, document, and to present this to an evidential standard. And it's our assessment that all spatial data from 0749 hours on the 11th of October onwards is for the sat tag only. So it had been detached from the bird at that point. So the tag was then transported by unknown means around the land in the area as identified. The tag was, with a high level of probability, static between 5 to 9 and 3 minutes to 10 that morning. The satellite tag was prevented from seeing a GPS satellite definitively at 0856. And this is consistent with being in a vehicle or in a building or in a structure or in a Faraday bag. And the tag then moved to an area of moorland near to the roost site and remained static at this location between 10:36 and 10:49 hours. The movement of the sat tag would have required motorized transport to cover the distances identified in those timescales, and it would have had to have had the ability to be off-road and cover a moorland track, so most likely a pickup or a quad. And there are several data anomalies, spatial engineering combined, consistent with human interference and manipulation. So we know that this has been tweaked by a person. On the 2 days between the tag being removed from the bird and then being identified as being in a block of forestry, the data strongly suggests the tag was stored in a location without access to the sky due to the limited data and the poor spatial accuracy. Despite us knowing, and we check this as well, the number of satellites overhead. So we know that that should be talking. So it's not moving and it's struggling to get the signal out. So 3 suspects were identified and we were able to map the spatial location data, and our hypothesis was the most likely route that the tag took and the locations along moorland tracks. Also the most likely property where the tag was warmed up by one of the suspects. And 3 suspects were investigated for theft, criminal damage, and wildlife offences. The 3 were searched, as well as the area where we believe the bird was killed, most likely shot in or as it was leaving the roost. A dog detection team and us and Northumberland Police were all involved. But unfortunately, despite this effort, we were unable to recover the bird. We got mobile phones, interviewed everybody, and we just couldn't identify the individual. But if you look at that plot there, you can see the yellow route where they took. You can see where the pings were. There's addresses on that map, and the red circle is it didn't go outside that area when you incorporate error ellipses as well. So you can see the extent. You can't dispute that crimes are taking place at that time. So what? As you can see, we know a lot, and we're doing a lot to try and investigate these offences. But so what? Very few are ever charged, and the crime is continuing, and it is, but it's not like it was. We are making a real difference. So you've heard about the changes that we've seen and we've been making with Operation Glassbeak. We know from intel that people are worried about the Harrier Task Force, that they're deliberately targeting birds without satellite tags on. They're worried about us doing our visits. A lot of people are worried about being highlighted as a hotspot and the damage that caused to them and to some of the stakeholders and sponsors that they have. And we use the data that I've talked about to map crimes and ID those hotspots. I go to each of those hotspots with local police and some of my team and I present all of this data to them. We go in at that very high level to make sure that the owners, the people with responsibility, know what's going on. And this enables us to apply pressure and to ask them to work with us and to make the crime stop. After all, they do have obligations under health and safety legislation to mitigate risks to the staff. And if they're saying it's not them, there's people walking around the hill committing crimes like theft and criminal damage and with shotguns, shooting things. There's a lot that needs to be done. So if it's not them, they need to be workers. And this isn't a passive request or a gentle request. People don't like what we're telling them, and we do get challenged a lot. It can be quite uncomfortable at the start of these meetings, but by the end of them, they're really positive, and people are nodding in agreement in relation to what can be seen. They can't dispute the data. They can't dispute that's the evidence that's presented to them. We all know we can't prove who's pulled the trigger, but it shows that something needs to be done. So 2 years we've been doing these visits now. These are the worst places for satellite, for crimes involving hen harriers, particularly with the satellite type stuff. And we have seen a significant change in activity, in crimes, and in everything that's going on really. But we know that the crime is still occurring and we need to do more. I want to use the IUCN guidelines for human wildlife conflict. That they didn't; those guidelines weren't actually published when I started the Harrier Task Force work. But the lady who's the chair for the human wildlife conflict group, Alexandra Zimmerman, I went and met with her, presented her with all of the work that we do for the Harrier Task Force, and she was very impressed. And she is now part of our process going forward. So we are working very, very closely with them, with IUCN to try and find long-term solutions, and that's the build phase of the whole project that I was talking about. We've got a few other things that we're trying to do for the future to prevent crime, have better success at investigations, and to change the balance from low risk, high reward to high risk, and it's just not worth it. There was a conviction a week or two ago where a gamekeeper had beaten a buzzard to death. Very, very low fine. So you think that's not a deterrent, but he's lost his house, he's lost his job, and the impact that then causes to him and his family is massive. So I know my wife would kill me if I'd have done anything like that and put all of that at risk. So it does have an impact, but we need to keep pushing and make it even worse. There's obviously some high level options and tactics that would bring about change. Practically on the ground, we need to identify the drivers for crime and to seek to remove them. Working with partners to showcase best practice, like the Rotterdam estate I mentioned earlier. Working to influence a change in attitude and business models, and we need to go after the money. If they're committing crime in order to operate, then the gains they make are also criminal. So we've now got accredited financial investigators and intel officers, and we are going to be pushing for more. We're going to try and get some funding to make that a proper functioning economic crime unit. We're going to keep identifying and mapping patterns and hotspots of criminality. What we do for the satellite tagged hen harriers, we now do for satellite tagged golden eagles, white-tailed seagulls, short-eared owls. I'm trying to bring in red kites, any birds that are tagged, any birds of prey that are tagged. I think we can do this for them. And going forward in the future, it's also something that we can apply to any species, particularly reintroduced species such as lynx, if we ever get to that point, or beavers. If there was any concerns around that and they were satellite tagged, it's just the same principles that we can implement for that. We're looking at new innovation and technology, the type of things that we're trying to do together, evidence and intelligence. Again, I'm always pushing and looking for different things. We've got a project for innovation and technology. We're looking at new cameras, 3D printers, air tags, um, having tracking devices in eggs, covert, tiny covert satellite tags on birds so you can't see them, they're hiding under the feathers, acoustic monitoring, acoustic ballistics, so that we can try and compare the sound from an individual shotgun to a location. New smaller covert tags, like I mentioned, proximity alarms, geofencing, use of AI. We're open to anything and everything, and we are pushing the boundaries as far as we can with this stuff. We're trying to utilize more techniques that have not been used much for wildlife crime, such as directed surveillance, undercover recruitment of covert human intelligence sources. And a big part of that is getting the authorising officers at the top of the police forces to realise the importance of this crime, the impact it's having, social, economic impact it's having on communities, but also the impact it has on people who are involved in wildlife crime and who are hurting animals. There's a well-known link between them also being violent towards people. So we can use that to sort of escalate this to bosses to enable us to project why this is a serious crime and let us have access to those tactics. And we need to push each other to problem solve. A big part of why I do these presentations and talk to people is because I want people to come to me with feedback, with ideas. I'd rather have 100 horrible ideas with one or two good suggestions in there than to get no ideas at all. So please, if anyone has got anything, please get in touch with me and help me drive it forward. And that's it from myself in relation to the presentation. I'll now hand back over to Jonathan or to Victoria, and I'll start taking questions if that's okay.